1960, 17 African countries gained independence that year. Flags changed, national anthems were written. Leaders who had been prisoners became presidents. Political freedom arrived. But here is what didn't change: the money. You can have your own flag, your own parliament, your own president, but if your currency is still printed in Paris, if your debt is denominated in Washington, every import requires permission from London banks. Are you really independent? That question, that tension has shaped African economics for the past 65 years. And what just happened might be the first real attempt at an answer. 185 countries just plug into a payment system that doesn't ask the former colonial powers for permission. Now, let me show you why this matters, why it took so long, and why the story is way more complicated than China good, West bad. Because it's not that simple. It never is. Alright, let me show you how this worked. And I'm going to try to make this not look like a conspiracy theory. Because it's not. It's just systems. Systems that made sense to people who designed them, but created real problems for everyone else. So the first example is the CFA franc. 14 African countries still use the CFA franc today. It's printed in France, managed by French Treasury. 50% of their foreign reserves have to be deposited in the French Treasury. Wait, it's not can be, have to be. Now, France, as usual, will tell you this provides stability, fixed exchange rates, low inflation, access to European markets, and they are not entirely wrong. CFA countries have lower inflation rates than some of their neighbors. But here is what else is true. When you need to import medicine or build infrastructure or invest in industry, you need permission to access your own reserves, and that permission comes from Paris. Example 2, the US dollar dependency. Now, even countries without the CFA franc face a different trap. Most global commodities, oil, wheat, copper, are priced in dollars. So if you're Nigeria, for example, selling oil, you get paid in dollars. Then you need to buy Chinese equipment, but China wants yuan. So it actually means you convert dollars to yuan, losing money on both conversions. Or you are Kenya trying to import Indian pharmaceuticals, but the trade is denominated in dollars, even though neither Kenya nor India are the United States. It's like anytime you want to buy something from your neighbor, you first have to exchange your money for your landlord's money, pay him a fee, then buy from your neighbor, or who then has to do the same process in reverse. Why would anyone design a system like that? They wouldn't, not on purpose. It just evolved after World War II, when America was 50% of global economy and most trade flowed through New York and London. But Africa in 2025, that system doesn't fit anymore. Now, let me show you what this costs, because numbers matter than emotions here. According to the World Bank's 2024 data, sending remittance to sub-Saharan Africa costs an average of 8.5% per transaction. That's the highest in the world, not because African banks are inefficient, but because every transaction has to route through correspondent banks in New York or London. And that's not corruption. That's just how the pipes were built. And here is where it gets worse. In August 2025, the Trump administration passed what's called the One Big Beautiful Bill. Buried in there is a new 1% tax on cash-based remittances. Money orders, Western Union type transfers starting January 1st, 2026. Now, to be clear, this only applies to cash-based transfers. If you send money through bank transfers or card payments, you are exempt. But here is the problem. Millions of African diaspora workers don't have easy access to bank or wire transfer services. They use Western Union, MoneyGram, money orders at corner stores. So let me give an example. A domestic worker in New York sending $500 back to Nigeria per month, she already loses $42 to the 8.5% transaction fee. Now add another $5 in tax. That's already $47, nearly 10% of what she's trying to send home. And that makes approximately $570 per year. Just gone. Now, if you are already losing 10% of your money just to send it home, and someone offers a system where you lose just 1%, what do you choose? That's what's making alternatives like CIPS suddenly very attractive. Now, it isn't ideology. This is math. Between 2020 and 2024, the Nigerian naira lost 70% of its value against the dollar. The Ghanaian cedi down 60%. The Zambian kwacha down 55%. Now, some of that is bad governance. Nigeria subsidizing fuel it can't afford. Ghana overspending on debt. These are real failures on African leadership. But some of it is structural. When global interest rates rise in Washington, African currencies crash. Not because Africa did anything wrong, but because capital flows back to dollar assets. Kenya's dollar reserves in early 2024, $6.8 billion, enough to cover about 3.5 months of imports. Now that's right at the danger level. One bad harvest, one oil price spike, and you are in crisis. Now Egypt's reserves dropped from $45 billion in 2011 to under $15 billion by 2023. So what do you do when you keep on scrambling every time for dollars just to keep your economy running? You borrow more dollars, which means you need even more dollars to pay back the loans. And now sending those dollars home costs more than ever. It's a trap, not a conspiracy. A real trap, and for 60 years there have been no exit door. October 2024, Kazan, Russia. While Western media was focused on who showed up to the BRICS summit and who didn't, something else was happening. Countries were getting access to a different system. Not better necessarily, not perfect, just different. Now, two things launched, or more accurately, one launched and one exploded. Now, the first is BRICS Pay, a new payment platform. So Russia was actually the country that was behind this push. You know, it was kicked out of SWIFT after its intervention in Ukraine. Now, the BRICS Pay was designed by Brazil after its PIX system. And the goal was to let member countries trade directly in local currencies. Now, secondly, we have the CIPS, China's cross-border interbank payment system. It's been around since 2015, but in 2025 it hit critical mass. As of June 2025, it connects 4,900 banks across 189 countries. Now, according to China's People's Bank, CIPS processed $12.7 trillion in the first half of 2025 alone. That's real money moving through real pipes. Now, let me be clear. This isn't a savior story. China is not riding in on a white horse to rescue Africa. They are building infrastructure that serves their interest, just like the West built infrastructure that served their interest 80 years ago. The difference is now there are two doors, two sets of pipes, two options. It's like living in a town with one grocery store. That store can charge whatever it wants, because where else will you go to? Then the second store opens. Suddenly both stores have to compete. Prices drop, service improves. Now that same logic applies here. So who is actually using this? Let me show you how fast African countries moved once the door opened. Kenya, October 2024, announced $3.5 billion of Chinese debt will be restructured, repaid in yuan, not dollars. Why? Because yuan interest rates are lower, and Kenya doesn't have to burn through scarce dollar reserves. Now, Kenya's central bank's data from June 2025 shows that the yuan now represents 5% of foreign reserves. 3 years ago, that was basically zero. But here's what's interesting. Kenya didn't abandon the dollar totally. They still hold 60% reserves in dollars. So they are diversifying, not switching. Ethiopia, October 2024, it started talks to convert their $5.38 billion Chinese debt to yuan repayment. Now, Ethiopia is broke. The IMF say their debt is unsustainable. Yuan conversion buys them time and lower interest costs. Egypt, July 2025. The Central Bank of Egypt signs agreements with China to settle bilateral trade in local currencies. Now, they are also exploring panda bonds, yuan-dominated bonds sold in Chinese markets. Now, this gives Egypt access to Chinese capital markets without needing dollars first. Nigeria, December 2024. Nigeria renewed a currency swap agreement with China. 15 billion yuan, that is about $2 billion. Now, this means Nigerian businesses can exchange naira for yuan directly. Now, I was talking on the phone with a fabric trader in Lagos last month. She imports textiles from China. It used to take her 1 week and cost her 6% in fees and conversion costs. Now with the yuan option, she does it in 2 days at less than 1% cost. Now that's not geopolitics, that's a woman trying to run her business. South Africa, June 2025. The Standard Bank and the African Import-Export Bank became direct participants in CIPS. They can now clear transactions without intermediaries. Standard Bank operates in 20 African countries, so this isn't just South Africa, it's Pan-African infrastructure. Notice what's happening here. These aren't ideological moves. African governments aren't saying we hate the West, we love China. They are saying we have options now, let's use them. That's different. Alright, so everything I just described looks pretty good, right? Lower cost, faster transactions, more options. But let me complicate that picture, because if I don't, I'm doing the same thing Western media does when they only show one side. Complication 1. The new dependency. Now, if you are paying loans in yuan, you need to earn yuan. How? By selling to China. Ken Dichenga, Kenyan economist, said something sharp. The sustainability depends on how much African countries can export to China. Translation: your debt repayment now depends on China's appetite for your exports. If China's economy slows or they find cheaper suppliers, or trade patterns shift, you are stuck. So yes, we are escaping some dollar dependency, but are we creating yuan dependency? Maybe. Complication 2. Governance still matters. Having access to cheaper financing doesn't mean much if your government wastes the money. Ethiopia got yuan debt restructuring. Great. But Ethiopia also printed money to fund a civil war, which created inflation. So having alternative payment systems doesn't fix bad governance. Zambia defaulted on Chinese loans, not because the yuan system failed, but because Zambian leadership borrowed money more than they could repay. There is an Igbo saying, Onye wetara udele, nelugwe kwa oga achu, ebe oga arokwasya. It means the person who invites a vulture to the sky must find a place for it to perch, meaning you can't blame external systems for internal failures. Complication 3. Data surveillance. When payments move through CIPS, Beijing sees the data, who is trading with whom, what's being bought, supply chain details. Now the West sees data through SWIFT. Now China sees data through CIPS. Is that better, or is just different surveillance? So let me bring this home. For 65 years, African countries have had political independence, but not financial independence. The CFA franc tied 14 countries to France. Dollar dominance meant non-CFA countries needed Western approval to participate in global trade. The IMF and World Bank loans came with conditions written in Washington, not Nairobi or Accra. And look, some of those systems worked. The IMF saved countries from complete collapse multiple times. Dollar stability allowed countries to plan long-term. Western markets provided export destinations. Now, this isn't a story with heroes and villains. But here's what's different now. For the first time since independence, African countries can say no thank you to terms they don't like, whether from Washington or Beijing, because there is something else to go. That's what matters, not yuan, not BRICS Pay, not even CIPS. The ability to say no. Now, it's like when you're negotiating a job offer and you have another job in your pocket. Suddenly you can push back on salary, on conditions, on everything. But if you are desperate and they know it, you take whatever they give you. But here is what I think matters most. And this is where the real opportunity is. All of this, BRICS Pay, CIPS, alternative systems, only matters if African countries use this moment to build their own strength. The African Continental Free Trade Area, Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, stronger regional currencies, intra-African trade that doesn't need dollar or yuan. So the goal here isn't to pick new masters. The goal is to stop needing masters. Okufa kuka zosa, gokufa kuka ntu. That's an African proverb. The death of one is the death of all. We are interconnected. African integration isn't just rhetoric, it's survival strategy. Because 65 years after independence, maybe it's time African money worked for African interest. Not because the West is evil, not because China is the savior, but because we deserve the same thing every other region has, which is the ability to shape our economic destiny. I also want to thank all our members. If you haven't joined our membership, I don't know what you're waiting for. So I'm shouting out to our members right after this. Now, quick shout out before we continue. To everyone who have joined the Strategic Lens, thank you. Seriously, you are the reason I spent weeks digging into stories like this instead of following algorithms. You are the reason we can tell African stories without watering them down for sponsors who don't get it. This kind of analysis, it takes time, research, pushing back on easy narratives, and you make that possible. If you haven't yet joined the channel, please hit the join button or click the link in the comment section. I'm going to drop the link of our membership in the comment section. You get early access, behind the scenes, breakdown, and you help us keep doing this work. Alright, back to the story. Look, there is a bottom line here. October 2024 opened a new door. 185 countries can now route around the traditional financial system. For Africa, this is significant. Cheaper transactions, more choices, less begging for dollars we don't have. But the real victory won't be we use yuan now instead of dollars. The real victory will be when we build African systems strong enough that the rest of the world has to ask us for permission. So here's what I want you to think about. What would it take for African currencies, African payment systems, African financial infrastructure to be strong enough that we are not choosing between Washington and Beijing, but making them compete for access to us? That's the conversation I want to have. Drop your thoughts below. Are you optimistic about these alternative systems? Worried about new dependencies? Somewhere in between? And if this reframed how you see financial independence, if you are thinking about dollar dying headlines, share this with someone who needs that perspective. Because 65 years after independence, maybe it's finally time our money come home. I'm Asongwe Luis. You're watching Africa Today, and this is the Strategic Lens. I'll see you in my next investigation.